All right, I think we're started. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight. Um, my name is Ellen Murphy. I am the founder of Sona. Um, let's see. So we have a good show tonight for it being the week of the fourth. So thank you so much. It's such an important topic, ergonomics. Um, and David's an amazing speaker, so we're so thankful to have him here. For those that haven't heard of Sona, I see a lot of Sona users, which is awesome, that have joined. But for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a way for offices, sonographers to send selected ultrasound images and clips directly from the machine to patients' phones. So if you're tired of the patients pulling out their phone to record the screen unauthorized, it's a great way to, offer a great alternative, and we're free for offices to use. So, would love to connect via email or on LinkedIn. I can tell you more, but I'm going to go over a couple of the housekeeping rules. So the presentation today will be somewhat engaging. So if you want to contribute, engage in the chat, that would be great. There's a Q&A box. You'll see Q&A along the bottom of your screen. You can ask questions throughout, and then David's going to answer them at the end. So the presentation will be about 45 minutes long with about 15 minutes of Q&A, give or take on either end. Um, you will get an email from the SDMS in the next few days with, the confirmation that you attended the webinar, and I believe a certificate to upload to get your CME. If you do not get that email, in the next few days, probably by next week, feel free to reach out and we can look into it. And then last but not least, we always get people from all over the map, different countries, different cities. So if you want to start by introducing yourself and telling us where you are from, that would be great. We love to see where everyone's calling in from or joining in from. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jen, and she will introduce Premier and David.
Thank you, Ellen. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jennifer Silva, Director of Education and Clinical Excellence for Premier Diagnostic Services. For those who don't know us, Premier Ultrasound Services has spent 28 years providing diagnostic ultrasound equipment and skilled sonographers to hospitals and clinics. We work alongside this profession every single day. And at Premier, we believe sonographer wellness is the foundation of great patient care. That's why we've partnered with Sona to bring you today's session as a free CME approved by the SDMS. And that brings me to someone I've truly been looking forward to introducing to you all. With more than 45 years in medical imaging, David is a former ultrasound industry executive and current medical advisor to EndoCure. He's a recognized advocate for sonographer safety and career longevity, featured in national media, including a recent Forbes article on ultrasound innovation. He's also the author of What Hurts and his new ebook, The Hidden Weight, which I will provide a link to so you all can go check that out. Today, he'll share practical strategies to help you reduce injury risk and extend your career, which we all want. So afterwards, you're going to have time for Q&A. Please drop your questions in the chat in the Q&A box. And during the interactive portion of this presentation, you can go ahead and drop it in the chat for any questions that David may ask. So I can give those answers to David. And please join me in welcoming David Cernacek. Thank you, David.
Yep. Thank you, Jennifer and Ellen. I appreciate the opportunity to share this important message and about the mission that sonographers do every day and the pain that they deal with, both physically, emotionally, stress-wise. There's so much that goes into it. So when I was asked to do this presentation, it was off the heels of me doing a post about my own personal experiences as a sonographer and as a patient, and realizing through the years that all of us as healthcare workers and especially as sonographers, we deal with a unique set of pains and difficulties that are not appreciated. I'm sure all of us as sonographers have heard a patient go look at us as we're zipping through the keyboard and doing our measurements, click, 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 move, and they're going, "Wow, your job looks easy." Well, it's not, and but we've all heard that. So I put together a little slide deck to share with you all, and I have a couple of places for questions and answers along the way, and hopefully it's something that it's not going to answer all the questions that people have. It's not going to give all the solutions in order to solve everybody's problems. But in the 45 years that I've been involved in medical ultrasound, I've watched it grow, change, advance, and become what it is today. But there are certain limitations and things that haven't changed in more than 50 years, that the future is bright. I will say that. So let me get into sharing my screen here, and let's start the show. All right. Um, well, for all of us, the love of ultrasound starts day one. I don't know about everybody on here, but the first time I saw ultrasound, I was in X-ray school. I was in the Air Force in 1980 in X-ray school, and they talked about new imaging modalities, and they showed computerized tomography CAT scan at the time, and it looked boring. It was took forever to do. You got to hold a button and keep telling the patient, hold your breath, hold your breath, hold your breath. And I said, no, that's not for me. But then I saw diagnostic ultrasound for the first time, someone actually taking a transducer and placing it on a patient, and boom, my eyes lit up. So my love for it started day one, but I realized so did the pain, and I'm going to address that as we go on. Just a quick thing about me. I am RVT, RDMS. I've been doing ultrasound for a very long time. I've specialized in surgical ultrasound, urologic ultrasound. I've worked for several manufacturers. I've been involved in clinical management. I've been involved in clinical applications management for multiple countries. It's something that I've learned to grow with and love because it kept me in the game. Just for a quick disclosure, I do some consulting work on the side. I try to claim that I'm semi-retired as of last July, as I approach my 65th birthday coming up. But so I do some medical advising with a company called EndoCure. They're out of Israel. And I'm receiving an honorarium for the presentation today. So, and I just wanted to share with you the views that I'm expressing are mine. They do not necessarily those of Endicure or the organizers of the webinar. So, bear with me, and if you disagree with something, well, that's fine. We can just I'm speaking from my experiences. So, before we begin, how many of you remember your first ultrasound exam? Not the one that was done on you or the one you witnessed, but one you actually got to put your hand on and able to scan a patient. All of us remember because it was an aha moment for most of us, where we put that probe down on the patient. That we got the sensation of putting the gel on there and having to grip the probe for the first time and place it, and trying to get something on the screen and looking at the image and sliding our hand all over the place because we didn't know how to keep our position. So we remember that. If it was an echo, maybe it was seeing the heartbeat for the first time. Doing an OB, maybe seeing a baby move around and jump, kick, heartbeat. So maybe it's seeing a gallbladder, the liver, whatever it was. There's something that we all can grasp onto that very first time that we saw an ultrasound exam and we had our hand on the probe. But with that in mind, something that we all deal with, how many remember in that time period your hand cramping, something getting fixed in position where once you started scanning and you had to scan for an extended period of time, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 1 hour, your hand not used to the gripping of the transducer, or if you cross trained and you went from scanning with typical curved array probes and linear, and now you're trying to scan with a phased array with your left hand, and you start getting all new cramps in the other hand. That generally happens that first day when you have the probe and you start scanning and you start trying to control and understand the pressure that's involved, trying to build the muscle memory that's involved so that we have that connection. And we get cramps and we start hurting. And it's that day that we start building up repetitive stress, repetitive injuries, and strain on tendons and muscles and joints. And it starts building up from that point forward. Why we fell in love with ultrasound, as I mentioned before. We all have different perspectives. Some people specialized OB. Some people started out in general imaging, and maybe it was a liver. Some people started out in cardiovascular and doing echo. Um, you know, some people got to do a little bit of everything. Maybe it was just doing some MSK work. Maybe it was working for a specialist that only looked at thyroids. Perhaps it was someone that you were involved with that had an ultrasound machine that went, God, I want to do that. That is so cool. I've seen that. I want to be able to learn to do that. So we each have something that connects us to why we fell in love with ultrasound. And the eventual goal for me is to share a message that we keep falling in love with ultrasound over the years. The as the injuries and things happen over the years, people get frustrated, the schedules build up, the pressure comes on, and all of us have things that push us to fall out of love at points in time. Maybe it's an extra call schedule. Maybe it's getting called in at 3 o'clock in the morning for a completely normal study that was called stat. I mean, and maybe it's your third call back and you're going, I don't want to do this anymore. Or maybe it's the pain in your neck or your shoulder. But every scan that is done really matters. It's because the patient care is involved. And if we got into ultrasound, and this is my opinion, if you get into ultrasound for the right reasons, it's to, number one, take care of patients, is to be a cog in the wheel and the mechanism of diagnosing and treating patients, helping to be the key detective in many cases to help the physician and the healthcare provider make the right decisions in treating that patient. So that's, to me, has always been paramount, and I stress it in people that have known me over the years, and I saw a couple of names on the list that I recognize from over the years. So it doesn't matter if you're in sales or you're in applications or you're scanning every day or whatever your role is, it's important to remember that on the other end of this transducer right here is a patient. And that patient could be anybody. It could be your neighbor. It could be, a friend. It could be uh, your parents, your children, maybe even you. And having been a patient on the other end, even recently, it's important to maintain that thought. And going back to that, the surprises that we get when we first start scanning. When I put together this slide, I realized that, of course, we're getting, looks like an early OB image of some sort or something here, but, the settings on the system up here showing abdomen settings. We all have experiences where we're given what they're looking for, a history diagnosis, and we start scanning, we find something completely unexpected, such as a pregnancy that no one knew. And I've even had that with students that we were training. They go to scan each other, and I can remember back in the early 80s when I was in the Air Force, one of the people we were cross training, she had just had a baby less than, it had only been like 9 months. She had no idea she was pregnant. So we're training each other to scan, and we put the probe on her, and guess what? Anne's pregnant. So those kinds of things, they bring back little memories and things we can think about. But try never to lose. And it's I understand the pressure because I've been there. I used to take call at places all over the place. I've done mobile ultrasound. I've done traveling, and it weighs on you at times, and you start to maybe lose a touch of that compassion. But find something that brings you back, that reminds you of why you fell in love with it in the first place. Um, why do we stay? I mean, it is frustrating. Things have not gotten easier over the last 50 years. The patient loads have gone way up. The demand has gone up from administration. Schedules have changed. When I started, schedules would be set in an hour, and now they're wanting to squeeze slots into 15 minutes at a lot of places. That puts a lot of stress because as soon as you get backed up, that's when everything falls apart. And if you're scanning with pain every day, it reaches a point where why am I doing this? How long can I keep doing this? I don't feel appreciated. I'm overworked. No one seems to care about, me, and what I'm doing. And I'm having to take all of this in. Um, but we do stay, and we do find ways to continue to fit in. And it doesn't matter what our specialty is. There was a reason we fell in love, and it still stays there. Sometimes it's a financial reason. Recent comments on some posts that I did on LinkedIn was, I can't afford not to scan anymore. I'm hurt, I'm in pain, but my life doesn't allow me to do anything but scan. I've got kids I have to take care of. I've got insurance, so I don't know what else to do. So hopefully everybody finds some things. So let me go back a little bit here. Now I have been in ultrasound a long time. This is not me, and I was nowhere around when this picture was taken. This was taken, I believe, in the late 1940s. Some of the early technologies and trials with ultrasound started out using a water bath. They were using quartz crystals to actually generate the energy, the sound waves, and make the transducer. And they would have someone sit in a water bath. And then I came across this picture looking around. Well, this is really interesting with the water bath. So, and there's some other things. This transducer right here, this is a company that was called Kretz Technique out of Austria. They were actually pioneers in ultrasound. A lot of people don't know about. They actually created the first 3D ultrasound system, which I'll touch on a little bit. But this probe was their first attempt at an annular array. So there were crystal sets in there that spun around and fired off in sequence. And so that gave them semi-real time. I think the frame rate was about 16 frames per second. So you had that nice windshield wiper effect. Um, but they were working on it, and that was from the 70s. This is actually an interesting one. This is an echo probe from a system in the 1960s or 70s. It's just a big block of thing trying to, imagine trying to get an apical window with that thing. That would be lovely. And then, of course, the good old contact scanners that came around, and they actually started being developed in the 70s. And there were multiple companies involved. Kretz Technique had one, Roe, J&J had one, Technicare had one that was out, and some little company called Picker. And this is the first machine that I started scanning on in 1980. It had been an updated Picker 80L digital. This was the digital upgrade to it, and it had a mechanical arm. This is the crystal itself. This is the transducer. And these would actually screw onto the arm and unscrew. There was no focusing. There was no electronic focusing. If you wanted to look at a deep focus, the back of the liver, you actually unscrewed the transducer was on there, and you put on a lower frequency, deeper focus transducer. You actually had a box of transducers that you would have to go select and choose. And then this arm would move. You had a control unit in your hand, and you would hold the arm with your other with your other hand, control the transducer, and you would control movement of the arm either a half a centimeter, 1 centimeter at a time. And then when you wanted to actually take an image, you would have to hit a foot switch on the floor and actually take an image onto X-ray film on a camera that was sitting next to the ultrasound machine. So things have, progressed greatly since when I started, but this is what I had to start with. Real time was just being toyed with and talked about, and it was interesting because even the images on here, they were imaging. We looked at the screen with black on white instead of white on black. And you're in a dark room for 8, 10 hours a day, that really messes with your eyes. Some things as real time started happening. I showed you that old Kretz technique. Well, this is a probe that ATL came out with in the late early 70s. Can you imagine holding this? This is actually a general purpose abdominal probe that we would use, transabdominal transducer. And notice the compact head, scan head design. But the probe itself was just huge, and you had to try to angle this head while it had three little rotating crystals in it that were firing off in sequence and spinning. And it was a lot of fun. And then I was around when the Acuson 128 came out in the early to the 80s. It was touted as the computerized sonography, and it got to be a huge deal. Every hospital wanted to have it. It was extremely expensive for the time frame, and none of these systems came with calculation packages either. So if you're doing whatever you're doing, you had to write down, you had to take images of the measurements. You had a caliper, an electronic caliper, but then you had to take all the measurements and then go to a chart and then look up the measurements and then put that into your report, manually writing it. So we did a lot of physical writing as well, which caused probably more hand cramps. But this was a big deal with computerized tomography. This monitor though was tiny. The actual monitor image itself was not very big. The machine was big and very heavy. And then we look at other things. I was when we replaced the Picker ADL at the Air Force Hospital that I was at, it was replaced by the predecessor of this machine, which is the GERT 3200. We had the GERT 3000, but it changed how we practiced ultrasound. And when we stepped away from doing slice after slice after slice, where we would present to the radiologist hundreds of slices, we would start at the xiphoid. Every 1 centimeter, we would take a slice and compile all our images, and then we'd turn the arm sagittal and do the same thing. And then we would go present those after going to the dark room to process the X-ray film with the images on it, and go to the radiologist. Of course, there was no digital imaging at the time to send anything, no PAC systems. So again, this was back and forth. So this lays the foundation about where we're at today, because things have gotten better with technology and the ability to send images, the ability to do reports on the fly where data populates into the reports, and things have changed so much. But this GERT 3200, I did my first applications work for a company as PRN applications, the GE on the RT30, the 3200, right after I got out of the Air Force in 1986. This little cute beauty right here was the ADR system. This was the first commercially available linear, dedicated linear ultrasound system that hit the market for OB use. This huge, massive transducer, and this thing was about this big, and you had to almost use two hands on it. If you had small hands, you probably had to use two. But what was an amazing thing with this was that it had electronic focusing. Remember, I talked about on the old uh, B scanners, we actually had to change the crystals to change the focal depth that we were scanning for, the area that we were focusing on. Well, this had a little button on the top of it that you could actually change, focal zones, and you could add up to four, which slowed the image way down. I mean, it moved slow back and forth, but you could do that. And this was starting, this is at the advent of OBGYN starting to take control of their usage of ultrasound. Because to this point, ultrasound was a radiology thing. And there was a turf war going on, and no one wanted to let do. And GYN said, listen, we need this. We need to be able to check position. I can still remember an X-ray doing full size X-rays of an abdomen to check position of a baby. Well, who does that anymore? I mean, looking back, you go, well, that's crazy. Why expose everybody to X-ray? We didn't have ultrasound ready and available to be able to use all the time. This company helped start to change that, and I think they were eventually bought by ATL. This beast was a version from Hewlett Packard, and this was a system that became massively popular for echocardiography in the mid to late 80s. In 1987, I worked for a mobile company. This box weighed about 400 to 500 pounds, and we pushed this up and down the ramp. They didn't have a lift on their vans, in and out of these vans, and then had to push these around to different facilities. You got the VCR. There was no digital recording. There was no cine loop on the system, so you had to actually use a videotape to record the activity. Um, it had, it only had a phased array and a linear. It didn't even have a curved array available for that system at the time, and it was a beast. And then some different transducers that were coming out along the time. This was when ATL moved up to creating a better type, and when they went from the compact scan head design to actually a new type of annular array that had the crystal moving back and forth, but you had the ability to electronically adjust your focus. This was one of their transducers. This was from a company called Diasonics. This was actually one of their vascular probes, and it was filled with oil. You actually had to make sure that the probe, and so was this one. You had to check to make sure you didn't get air bubbles in the probe after using it for a while, and you would have to take a syringe and refill them to make sure that they, kept functioning properly. And this was the first duplex probe that I used from a company called Interspect after I learned to do carotid Doppler. And the interesting thing was there was no color and there was no live duplex. You could scan in B mode, and then you would have to switch over to pulse wave Doppler and hope that you were in the right spot. And doing vertebral arteries with that was a beast. Move on to the 90s, and I call this ultrasound of my youth because this is, started when I was about 19 and going up into my 20s, and these are some of the systems that I used. In my career, I've actually scanned with I think I've estimated more than 120 machines, individual different machines over the years. So, I've had my hands on a lot, but these are ones that kind of stood out to me, and I call it ultrasound of my youth. And I was talking to somebody, and they go, "Why do you want to even bring up your age and that?" Well, a little anecdote. So a few years ago, I was doing an install of a piece of equipment at a major university's animal lab, and someone mentioned, "Well, yeah, you've been in ultrasound for a long time. This is great." I said, "Yeah, I started when I was 12 years old," and meant that as a joke. Well, one of the PhD guys there who looked like he was probably about 25 he gets this big smile on his face. He gets all excited. He goes, "Oh, that is awesome." He said, "I graduated high school when I was 12 too." So I stopped using that joke, except for little special moments like these. As we got into the 90s, things changed. Technology changed, computerized technology, being able to use different algorithms started changing. Systems didn't get any smaller, except for this one. This was Sonosite, but it was just a really basic black and white system. But it opened the door for portable ultrasound to be what it is today, point of care ultrasound. The founder of that company happens to be a friend of mine that I actually talk to pretty frequently, and it's amazing how they took this from nothing and built up just it really created the point of care market. The top left is that Kretz Technique company I mentioned prior. This was the very first 3D ultrasound system in the world, and they released this in 1989. And you think about the computerized, the technology for computers in 1989. Smartphones weren't around. Most people, if you had a cell phone, it was in a bag. I mean, everything has changed so much. What they introduced and what I saw was utilizing new technology to be able to see multiple planes of view, sort of like CT and MR. So they had a specially designed transducer. We would put it on a patient, hold it still, had the patient hold still, and it would do a sweep over the area and gather a volume data set, which then we could look back and see multiple planes from the single scan. Very rudimentary. The image quality is what it is from that time period compared to what we have now with 4D and the detail and the algorithms and the processing power. And then this is one of the early images from 3D. To process an image like this on this machine in 1990, 91 took about 60 minutes. We would do the acquisition and hope that we got the baby in the right position and everybody was holding still and nothing changed. And then we would start the process. We'd walk out of the room. We'd come back in about an hour to see what it looked like. So things have really dramatically changed. Many people, if you've been around long enough, remember the Accuson Sequoia. This was a bread and butter system for vascular in the 90s. So if you recognize this is an ATL system here, and this was an old BK system. So a lot of things. I don't want to bore everybody with technology or old machines because you guys are going to think this is some car show or something. So let's start really talking about why we're here. And I mentioned earlier that the pain begins on day one. The injuries are repetitive and they happen over a period of years. Sometimes they happen quicker, depending upon what we're doing and where we made a wrong reach or we had to hold too long in one spot. Maybe it's an old injury from, whatever in our lives that we aggravated doing scans. But when did pain become normal? People haven't really talked about it. We just sort of accepted it as sonographers and ultrasound specialists and echocardiographers and vascular techs. We just sort of accepted that this was what we had to put up with in order to get the job done and for our career. But I don't think it should be normal. And over the last many years, and especially over the last months, I've done a lot of research on how many injuries are taking place and how many people are hurting. And the truth is, most sonographers on a daily basis, next to you, across the street, your friend or down the hallway, around the world, they're scanning in pain. It could be wrist, an elbow, an arm, a neck, a shoulder, a back, fingers cramping, you start getting locked digits, for different reasons. But we scan in pain all the time. And we pop some ibuprofen or Tylenol or put some gel on it, do some stretching and try to move on. And industry hasn't paid a lot of attention to it over these years. So while all this technology has gotten better and the image quality's got great, some of the probes have gotten lighter, the systems are much faster. We can get higher quality images with less effort many times. but the whole functionality of how we acquire that data and those images, that hasn't changed. It's still driven by someone holding that transducer and putting forth all the effort and using muscle memory and thinking through the whole process, and it builds up. So why do sonographers get hurt? I'm preaching to the choir here. We all uh, have stories and an understanding of this. Repetitive motion is the biggest because we're doing the same thing over and over and over again for hours and hours and hours every day. Different types of patients, different types of angles we have to do, different levels of pressure we have to do, and we repeat that. And you add that up over years and years and years, and that motion causes damage. Static loads, awkward position. How many of us have tried to, okay, we're going to scan the left kidney. Well, how do I get over here to the other side of the patient? And we reach and we bend, or the patient's is in some sort of a different type of bed, or the body habits, they're really real big, or they're something that else has caused us to reach and do something in an awkward position, and we get hurt. Sustained grip, holding and squeezing that transducer, no matter, especially if it's a smaller transducer. You think about the difference in the size from that big linear bar, which was pretty much like a brick. You could do but as we got to uh, smaller phase transducers and phased array transducers, your grip had to come shorter and shorter, smaller and smaller, with your fingers doing most of the work. And that sustained grip over a period of time also causes damage. An excessive force. I mean, it's, over a period of time, it just builds up. So, what are some of the challenges that we face every day? And again, I'm preaching to the choir. If you've scanned for very long, you've been in a hospital, you've seen almost all different types of things. Ultrasound, because it is ultrasound and it is quite portable compared to other imaging modalities, can go almost anywhere today and is used all over the place, which means they ask us to go to where they want it to be done. So weird stretchers on bed. I've scanned patients in hallways, in an ED where they wanted to check a line or something real quick. They're so busy, you have patients laying in the hall. So you do what you got to do. ICUs, hospital beds with different types of rails, and for some reason, not all of them are the same. They all are designed differently, and release points are different, and how they have them positioned in the room. Patients can't get out of a wheelchair. It's just easier if I just go sit down next to them and try to scan them in the wheelchair instead of getting them to a table. Patient bed list, you name it. We've all seen different types of things, and we've all been creative in how we obtain the best images possible. People often ask why sonographers end up in awkward positions. It's real simple because we don't scan in ideal situations. We have to be, some places are, they have the same routine that's over and over again, and they maybe have the thing. But for the majority of people scanning, if you're in a hospital, then this is the kind of thing you have to deal with. You scan real patients in real rooms, and you have to deal with real limitations. And so that puts additional strain and stress on our bodies. Um, yeah, portable scanning. I remember the first, I showed you that the HP system that I worked for a mobile company back in 1987. This picture's been a little exaggerated on the size of it, but you get the point. I mean, these things were huge. The wheels did not always turn easy. Some hospitals, in order to get from one place to the other, you had ramps you had to go up to try to push this stuff, even within the hospital itself, to go from one side of the hospital or department to the other. Portable scanning, is still kind of a challenge because some of the better systems that they want to use that are in the network or in the system, they're larger, more premium systems, and you still have to push and put a lot of effort to get them from point A to point B. Things have gotten lighter. The manufacturers did listen. Technology allowed computer boards to be smaller, the systems in general to be lighter materials. But the environments haven't changed. We still have to go into those things and fit in those tight spaces. And, pain points are still there. Technology's gotten a little better. But, it's still the same problems. So this is one of the first, I already asked a couple of earlier questions. This is one that everybody has an answer to. And if you want to pop in a couple of points here, share with us, it would be great. If you want to send me a little thing on LinkedIn or something to let me know, I'd be more than happy to share your some of your stories in that. And but what clinical situation has challenged you with ergonomics? We've all been there. We've gone, how
That's
in the world am I going to do this?
that's a great question, David. I'm just waiting for a couple people to throw in,
Great. Yeah.
their challenge. So biggest challenge, I have Mary being expected to scan 15 to 20 patients in an 8-hour shift, 5 days a week.
Yep.
Thank you, Mary.
Yep. It's a
Yep.
real thing and it's not getting
Mhm.
better. The demand is going up, but the number of sonographers to meet that need can't keep up with the pace. So how do we address that? But that's a great point. The schedules have been overloading and the demands on the sonographer. And as sonographers, we also, because we are compassionate people, we get a patient an add on, hey, Dr. So and so, we got this patient. She may have this or he may have this, and it's really concerning. What do we do? I'll just have them come back tomorrow. Tell them to go across the street.
Yeah.
Most of the time, our pride and our compassion says, I'll fit them in
We have a
because
few more too, David. Sorry, they're coming in. Morbid obesity.
oh
Because it's
boy,
all of
yes.
us. We have
Oh yeah.
tables, beds that do not go up or down. Yep,
Yes.
patient body habitus. The chair can only get so close to the bed. Scanning someone in a wheelchair that doesn't move, their kidneys and bladder, as well as a DVT study. Yep. And those are some big challenges that we face daily. Yep. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you guys. Yeah, everybody has a story. Every multiple stories, and like the previous question, 18 patients a day and things. Those are usually the days when you get all the extra add-ons that then you get the really difficult patient thrown in the middle of it that throws the whole schedule off. But you still are there for a reason, and you're there for a very important key reason, and that is to help patients. And it's a unique position that patients don't generally understand it, and many other related healthcare workers don't appreciate it. What we go under and the stress that's involved with everything. Uh, Anything else stand out there, Jennifer, or shall we move on?
Yeah, so let's see here. TV scans, the sonographer is saying she's
I
only
didn't even touch
4'11".
that. Yeah.
They're 4'11". She's only 4'11", so doing the scans is very challenging. Yeah. And and it depends on the size of the room as well when you're inside
Yes.
during these summer, nights or it's daytime when it's very hot outside too. The rooms can get really hot, which is also another challenge that we
Yeah.
face. But yeah, the scheduled templates too is a huge help as well, and breaks in between to try to give us a little break, a little shoulder break, is super helpful. But yeah, I see a lot of people in the chat dropping in different situations. We've all been there. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it is amazing, and people don't realize. I worked for a group of doctors that owned a machine, and it was a regular exam room, not a big one. And it was during the time that I had just within the last few years learned to do echo. So I started scanning left-handed. Well, because of the size of the machine and the tininess of the room, I started doing all my scans for this group of doctors left-handed. So my abdomens, my pelvics, my carotid Dopplers, my extremities, I did all left-handed, which probably extended my career and gave my right hand a little bit
Yes.
of rest. But they don't think about this when they say, "Oh, we're going to get an ultrasound, put it in here, and we're going to have you do this." And then those rooms got very hot because those machines put out a tremendous amount of heat back then. The electronics involved really created. I mean, you could heat a small house with some of those machines. But thank you all so much for sharing some of your things, and we'll gather some of these little results. And I like sharing people's stories, and I appreciate everybody taking time. Practical ergonomic solutions. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys have all thought about it. You've lived it. People have brought things up to you. Um, maybe if there's a new student coming in here that's in the group or something, well, how do I do this? And so it's just the simple things, making sure that your equipment is positioned properly next to the bed so that you're not too far away, you're not having to bend over. That, systems also used to not to be height adjustable. For our friend that's 4'11", I'm 6'1". And so, the height of the system for me and the height of the system for her has got to be completely different. The monitors didn't tilt, they were just swiveled if they did that. So there's a lot of things that ergonomics that have been thought about, keyboards popping out, cable hangers and things to be more efficient. And the with the flat screen monitors today and the HD screens, being able to move them around and swing them around, that's been great. But take a look at your room. If you're going into it, if you're in a new position, or they're asking your opinion on these. I would have loved to have had this size of a room for most of my exams, where we got room for a couple chairs over here, and we got no, that's not reality. These are nice optimal things that we can look at and wish we had. Bed height, you know, especially in the 80s, no one thought, why do we need to adjust the height of the bed? Well, that's more expensive. We're not going to spend the money on that. And it's something I will address here in a little bit as well. But making sure that this aligns with who you are, your reach, your arm reach, your stretch, your height. You're doing everything, handling the keyboard with one hand, you're handling the probe with the other. There's a lot going on. And so these are just kind of the basics. And again, I keep saying I'm preaching to the choir because I keep hearing everybody singing about the same kinds of things, and we all know that we know all the words to the songs. So and even in echoes, it's a different thing. They come from the other side. It's interesting though, when I had my echo done recently, she was an old school sonographer that never learned to scan left-handed. So she put the machine at my feet with me on my left side, and she scanned backhanded with her wrist backhanded to scan my echo, which was interesting because it brought up a question that led to that little book that I put together. We got done, and I look at her and I said, I've been doing some research on sonographer injuries. I just asked her one simple question: what hurts? And in the snap of a finger, she answered, my scapula. My scapula hurt all the time. And it was just for me observing how she was scanning. And we all have little quirks and things we get comfortable with, and we build up routines that are successful for helping us get image quality. But that's a good question. What hurts? Because everybody has something that's hurting. If you're a sonographer, you hurt someplace, and it's work related. Ergonomic equipment. Boy, has this changed over the years. Someone brought up chairs, not being able to get the chair close enough to the table. They now have adjustable chairs. I had a stool that would unscrew from the floor. We just twist it up and down, the old surgical type stool, or you just stood there. When the contact scanner, it was you just stood by the bedside because you had to have one foot to take the images on the camera, and you had one controller in one hand, and you had the arm that you had to move, and yeah, it was amazing. Tables. This is something that administrators do not pay enough attention to. They think that the a straight up exam table that the doctor uses to, with the little paper roll come down, the patient hops up on the table and sits there. Oh, we can use this. I'm going to be a little graphic here and say bullshit because it limits what you have to do in the positions you have to put yourself into. So there have been multiple. I mean, if you Google ultrasound exam tables now, there's got to be 50 of them out there that have drop down sections. They're electronic. Some are not electronic, but that have switches that you can drop down the sections. So, if you're doing echoes, you can easily access the apical windows of the patient on their left side without trying to squeeze your hand between the cushion of the mat on the bed and the patient. So there's a lot of things. I'm not. I didn't. I should have probably broke this name out. I don't know even if that company exists, but I pulled this up. But cable, how you hold the cable, how the kind of pressure it puts on your wrist. Some people have different types of wrist devices. There's a lot of things to look at. There's a lot of tools available. And if you don't have some of these things where you're at, it doesn't hurt to ask. And all they can do is say no. But you've made them aware of why these things are important. And that's kind of what we're talking about because these things are important. Position, proper height, reaching, bending, support tools to reduce stress and strain in the arms and hands. Small things over a period of time, just as the injuries are progressive and develop and get worse over time, small changes can reduce those injuries and the repetitive stuff that we do. So, something to think about. If you have some of these, and I've been in clinics that had all of these wonderful things and all the adjustable tools and adjustable systems, and I've also been in places that we scanned on just a might as well have been a massage table. There was no flexibility to do anything with. So, just a good thought. Which ergonomic tools have made the biggest difference in your practice, where you're at, or maybe someplace you've been? This is, and it'll be interesting. I want everybody to kind of look at these 4 slides and point out the unusualness of one of these grips. AI can do some amazing things, and this is why AI will never replace people completely because sometimes it does stupid things. And so I left this intact. So one of these grips has a really interesting thing, and it's something that I've taught for years in gripping, teaching new people to hold a probe. And of course, everybody sees it. It's the finger anchor. It's actually taking your hand and making sure that the outside of your hand and your pinky finger are in contact with the patient. It gives you an anchor. You're looking at the screen. You're not slipping and sliding. You have a fulcrum and a position holder, and you don't slip and slide. Well, when I'm putting this together, creating the image, I don't know anybody with a pinky finger like this that can actually bend this far and this in that grip on the hand. That finger must be twice as long as the index finger and extremely flexible. But I left that in here on purpose instead of fixing it because I think it's kind of dramatic and I don't know, I got a laugh out of it, and I try to laugh every day. So I hope you guys saw that and went, well, what in the world is going on here? So changing probe grip can be important. When teaching people, one of the first things I see, especially trying to teach doctors to scan, whether they're doing MSK or they're doing injections or things, is they tend to want to they grab the top of the probe. They grab it up high and not down low, and they have no control, and they're drifting all over the place, and they're wondering why nothing's working. So proper grip of the probe is important, and it has a tremendous amount of impact over the long term. Then you get fewer hand cramps, maybe adjusting as you go. Sometimes you have to adjust in order to get to certain windows. You have to maybe put the probe in your palm of your hand instead of gripping it from the top. There are multiple things that you can do. So, and as you grow through your experience, or if you have experience, we all have little tricks of the trade that we do that make it easier for us. Um, Basic body mechanics, something that no one talked about in the 1980s and the 90s when I'm in and out of clinics all the time. It's starting getting better paying attention. As a matter of fact, people are making, careers off of this. And, the field of physical therapy has, you know, I think they have a whole special section just for sonographers to help us deal with our musculoskeletal injuries and all our back pains and the therapy that we go through. So these are some of the basics. Your neutral posture, align your body, try to keep your head straight, not looking way back over your shoulder to be able to look at the monitor across. Try to do some simple things that relieve the stress and strain on your body. Keep your elbows close to yourself, because the more you have your arms out away from you, the more stress that puts on your shoulder that causes issue. Turning your torso without being able to, there's so much that goes on to that. Try to get your body in alignment with where you're going. Go to where the image is. If it's down, don't be reaching behind you to try to scan down the leg. Actually move your chair back, or move the table up, or move the machine in your chair back to go to the area that you're going to focus on. Don't just try to say, well, it's in a fixed position, I got to move around. Do what you can to save your own body. That's important, because if you're not there, who's going to do it? The patient still needs to be seen, and you're not easily replaceable from wherever you're at. Stable foundation. Try to keep your feet flat and well supported. If you can get an adjustable chair, get one that's easy adjustable. If they're administered, and in my outreach to folks, I'm hearing from a lot of administrators and a lot of industry folks that are paying attention to the demands that are happening to the sonographers, because it's real. The damage is real, the hurt is real, the pain is real. And when a sonographer is out of work, it can cost a facility hundreds of thousands of dollars for each incident. When you figure in workman's comp, time off, lost use of the machine, lost use of patients, or if they have to pay to bring in, an outside, tech or sonographer to, from a service, that all adds up. And it can be weeks, months, that someone is injured that they're unable to perform. And not to mention, as we're more experienced, we walk away, we take all that knowledge that we had of all those hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of exams that we've done. We've built up a mental catalog of what this looks like, and helps get through and helps give better results for the physicians and for the patients in the end. Micro breaks, and someone mentioned this. This was nothing for Skinner. Give you a schedule. Oh, we're going to give you a schedule after, each patient, each scan. Normally what we're doing is we're busy writing up the reports of the scan that we just did, so that it's not delayed. So now we're sitting there and we're going through, the report form, and we're going through the study and making sure all our measurements are correct and everything is as we want it to do. We're not taking the time to actually relax our bodies and refresh our minds in between what goes on. Because why? There's another patient waiting, and that patient's got a full bladder, and they said, we told them 32 ounces and they drank 6 beers. I actually had that happen once. I thought beers would be just fine, and they don't want to wait. So do what you can. There's are so many good resources, YouTube videos, you can search engines, you can find pamphlets, you can find specialists that teach these courses and these stretching techniques. Find something that works for you, something that you're comfortable with, and build it into part of your routine throughout your day. And the thing is to keep you safe and to keep you from hurting and being in pain all the time. And if there's something that you find that works for you, do it. They can gripe all they want to out front. You still have to take care of you, and you're very important.
These are
So
great
building
visuals
in
too,
microgrids.
David, to help
Oh, well,
everyone
thank you.
too. If they can get a copy, of these visuals to place, put it up at work in their rooms is fantastic.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, so thank you for providing.
Maybe I'll release some of these as PDFs out there on
That would
through
be
LinkedIn, and
fantastic.
folks can
Yeah,
have them. Yeah, yeah.
these are
These are some
great.
good basic stretches and things that over the years, that they matter. And one of the things over here, muscle fatigue, but the muscle fatigue builds up onto something else. The muscle fatigue also adds to mental fatigue because when your body hurts and it feels tired and strained, your mind starts feeling tired and strained, and that wears on you. And then you risk missing something. You risk not being able to function at your best. And that's a huge thing for us as sonographers. We don't want to miss anything. We are the ultimate detectives. We're using real-time imaging to look for things that no one else gets to see and find things that people only suspected. And we're the frontline detectives. And so keeping our muscle fatigue down, keeping our mental fatigue down is massively important.
David,
Uh,
thank you so much for supporting us too. I think we have just a few more minutes for
ah,
time to do
okay.
Q&A. I know this topic is so important in supporting
I'm
everyone.
I'm sorry. I didn't. My
I
phone went off. I
know.
didn't see my timer.
No, it's
But I'll
totally
skip through that.
okay.
I'll go through this. I'm almost done, so I'll go through the rest of this fairly quickly. But the
Fantastic.
key
Thank you, David.
takeaways: get the right equipment if you can, use the proper grips, body mechanics. Try to build in your schedule. Try to talk to your administrators and your managers, about building these things in and how important they are. I can share with folks if they reach out to me through LinkedIn or Facebook. I did a really nice white paper recently. The hidden cost: more than 100,000 sonographers scan in pain every day. Chronic pain, burnout, fatigue, career shortened. They quit and walk away after 20 years. How are they going to replace a 20-year veteran? You can't. It's difficult. Mental impact, overwhelming feelings that happen with us. All of these things come together. Things that can be done impact on the department as well. The cost on healthcare, longer patient waits, increased facility cost, impact of quality of care. All these things add up. Aging workforce. None of us, I can't scan the way I did 30 years ago or even 10 years ago. Matter of fact, I don't get a chance to scan anymore at all, which is disappointing because I love it. So protecting the future sonography, the technology's out there. Maybe that's a topic for another day of what's happening with AI, robotics, new technology, where it's going, some things that are happening. I would be happy to maybe do another talk sometime, or if I'm doing one, I'll post it and maybe everybody can find it and things because there's some exciting things happening. They're on the road to helping the sonographer, to saving the sonographer. Protecting, not replacing. That's my goal when I talk to these companies. And I talk to multiple companies on a weekly basis that are looking for the future, looking at what they can do with the technology. And I stress, you're not going to replace the sonographer. How do we help them? Extend their careers, keep them in the game, make their job smoother, faster, more accurate, and develop techniques and tools that are going to be helpful so that the end result is better clinical outcomes for our patients. People are the purpose, the patient is the why. Every scan matters, but so does every sonographer and every echo tech and every ultrasound specialist. So, a lifetime of service should not require a lifetime of pain. So I want to say thank you to everything that you do for your patients and for each other in supporting yourselves. And that wraps it up.
Thank you so much, David. We have a few minutes for some questions. If anyone has any questions to throw it into the Q&A box, so David can answer any questions that you may have. Let's see. So we're getting, and we're also someone said, incredible presentation. Thank you so much from Long Island, New York. Everyone's saying thank you. Excellent presentation. Let's see here. Any advice for me? Let's see here. So she's the 4'11". She's doing TV scans on not on a non-adjustable bed.
Oh my goodness. Um, wow. Trying to that's a difficult position that you're in. To do adjustable chairs, if you can get one, is helpful. I would, yeah, it's important that the facility understand the difficulty that you're being put under physically to be able to obtain the quality of stuff that they want to get done. So, there's different, adjustable. If you don't have a table, maybe an adjustable chair is helpful, where you can come up or come
Steps
down to
still,
fit everything.
yeah,
That's the best thing you can try to do. Get the machine as close to you down, away from the patient. The patient doesn't need to see the screen. You do. So
yeah,
don't be afraid to move the machine down towards the foot of the bed where you're at, and
right.
try to find the right angle. So, um, you know, and hopefully your administration starts to listen and will think about getting an adjustable bed, because it's massively important. Because if they have to replace you on you get hurt, you're out for weeks to months, or maybe career ending. It's going to cost them, whenever they lose a sonographer to replace a quality sonographer, it can cost them $700,000 in these facilities. That gets administration's attention.
Yeah. You know what I also love, Dave, that in the chat, I'm also seeing their colleagues, fellow sonographers, giving advice as well on how to help as well. And
Excellent.
they mentioned a step stool too to help her as well,
Yes. Yeah,
which
I
is
thought that
nice.
I
Yeah,
I didn't want to sound condescending in telling her she needed a step stool, but
no, it happened. So if anyone else has any questions, you can feel free to email Ellen, myself, or David, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. David, I appreciate you so much for bringing awareness and having our back, in the ultrasound community, and letting administrators and helping other sonographers in the field have career longevity, because that's what we want. We got into it because we
yes.
love helping our patients. So I really appreciate you bringing awareness to this and reaching the masses. And thank you so much, everyone, for this evening. I hope everyone enjoyed this presentation. We look forward to our next presentation. And thank you again for joining us. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you all,
Thank you,
You.
everyone.
and happy scanning.
Yeah.